You're watching TV. Someone hands you the remote. The volume is on 23. And something in your brain just twitches. You can't explain it. There's nothing wrong with 23. It's a perfectly good number. But you change it anyway. To 24, maybe 22. And only then can you actually focus on what you're watching. If you've ever done this, adjusted the volume not because it was too loud or too quiet, but because the number felt wrong, you're not alone. And you're not crazy. But you might be more interesting than you think. That's what we do here at Pattern Logic. We take the little things you do, the ones you've never really questioned, and we trace them back to the patterns underneath. If you're into that kind of thing, hit subscribe. We drop new videos every week. Now, let's talk about why your brain hates odd numbers. Here's what researchers found. In a study by Terence Hines at Pace University, participants were shown pairs of digits and asked to identify when both were odd or both were even. On average, it took people 20% longer to process odd numbers than even ones. 20%. That's not preference. That's your brain literally working harder. This is called the odd effect. Odd numbers require more cognitive effort. They don't divide cleanly. They leave remainders. They sit there unresolved, like a sentence without a period. And your brain, which is constantly trying to conserve energy and find patterns, doesn't love that. Even numbers, on the other hand, feel complete. They split perfectly in half. No leftovers. No loose ends. When mathematician Alex Bellos surveyed 44,000 people about their emotional responses to numbers, even numbers were consistently rated as calmer, friendlier, and more satisfying than odd ones. People used words like balanced and stable. Odd numbers got awkward and incomplete. So when you look at a volume display showing 23, your brain registers something unfinished, something slightly off. And when you change it to 24, you're not being irrational. You're giving your brain what it's been trained to want: symmetry, balance, closure. But here's where it gets more interesting. Not everyone experiences this the same way. And understanding where you fall on the spectrum is actually useful information about how your mind operates. Let me break it down into 4 types. The first type is what I call the fluency seeker. This is most people. You prefer even numbers because they're easier to process. You might adjust the volume, you might not. If someone else leaves it on an odd number, you notice, but it doesn't ruin your day. It's a mild preference, not a need. This is just your brain appreciating cognitive ease. Nothing clinical, just a quirk that makes the world feel slightly more organized. The second type is the completeness craver. For you, odd numbers don't just feel less pleasant, they feel genuinely incomplete, like something's missing. You'll almost always change the volume. You might extend this to other areas: the number of ice cubes in your glass, the number of items in your shopping cart, the time you set your alarm. You can override the discomfort if you have to, but it takes effort. You're aware this is a little odd, no pun intended, but it doesn't really interfere with your life. The third type is the pattern controller. You've developed specific rules. Maybe it's not just even numbers. Maybe it has to be a multiple of 5, or end in 0, or be divisible by 4. You have a system, and deviations from that system feel wrong. When the rule is violated, you feel genuine tension, not just preference, something that sits with you. You might feel embarrassed about it, but you do it anyway because the alternative feels worse. This is where quirk starts to shade into something more. The fourth type is what psychologists call just right, OCD, sometimes called perfectionism, OCD, or arithmomania. This is clinical. The discomfort isn't mild, it's intense and persistent. If you can't fix the number, you can't stop thinking about it. It loops. You know it doesn't make logical sense, but that knowledge doesn't help. The behavior isn't about satisfaction, it's about relief from anxiety, and it consumes real time and energy. Research suggests about 48% of people with OCD experience these not just right symptoms. Now, here's what's important. Most people watching this fall into the first or second category, a quirk, a preference, maybe a mild compulsion that adds friction but doesn't control you. But some people are further along that spectrum than they realize, and the difference matters. Here's the key distinction. With a quirk, you could stop if you really wanted to. It's voluntary. You might feel mild satisfaction when the number is right, but if someone stopped you from fixing it, you'd shrug and move on. With clinical OCD, you know the behavior is irrational, but you can't stop. The compulsion isn't driven by satisfaction. It's driven by the need to escape discomfort. And if you're prevented from completing the ritual, the anxiety doesn't fade. It builds. One person with counting OCD described it this way. I picture numbers in rows of 2. When there's an odd number, 1 goes without a pairing. It's isolated, abandoned, like someone got left behind. That's not a quirk. That's a brain stuck in a loop it can't escape. So why does any of this happen in the first place? The leading theory goes back to evolution. Your brain is wired to seek patterns because patterns meant survival. Symmetry in a face signaled health and genetic fitness. Symmetry in the environment signaled stability and safety. Asymmetry, things that didn't match, didn't divide, didn't balance, could signal danger. Even numbers are symmetrical. They pair, they complete, they resolve. And your brain rewards you for noticing them because evolutionarily, noticing patterns kept your ancestors alive. The ones who ignored asymmetry got eaten. The ones who noticed it survived long enough to pass on their genes. There's also research showing that the brain literally links positive emotions with symmetry and mild disgust with asymmetry. This isn't conscious. It happens below awareness, shaping your preferences before you even know you have them. Your brain decided it didn't like 23 before you had time to think about why. So when you see that odd number and feel that tiny twitch of discomfort, that's not weakness. That's millions of years of pattern recognition programming doing exactly what it was designed to do. The question isn't whether you have this wiring. You do. Everyone does. The question is whether the wiring is serving you or whether it started running the show. For most people, adjusting the volume to an even number is harmless. It takes half a second. It creates a small sense of order, no cost, small benefit. That's just your brain being efficient. But if you find yourself unable to start a task until certain numbers are right, if you're spending real time on numerical rituals, if the discomfort when things are off is intense and hard to shake, that's worth paying attention to. Not because you're broken, but because your brain might be working harder than it needs to. The good news is that even clinical just right OCD is highly treatable. Exposure and response prevention and therapy, where you deliberately leave things wrong and sit with the discomfort, has strong evidence behind it. The brain can learn that the discomfort passes, that nothing bad happens when the number stays odd, but you can't address something you haven't noticed. And most people with these tendencies have never really examined them. So here's what I want you to take away. If you need the volume on an even number, you're not weird. You're not broken. You're experiencing something millions of people experience, rooted in how human brains are built. But pay attention to where you fall on the spectrum. Is this a preference that adds order to your life? Or is it a compulsion quietly stealing your time and peace of mind? The volume dial is just the surface. Underneath it is a window into how your brain processes the world, what it finds complete, what it finds threatening, and how hard it works to make things feel right. Most of the time, that's a feature, not a bug. But it's worth knowing the difference. I'm curious, where do you fall? Are you someone who adjusts the volume every time, or can you let an odd number slide? Does this extend to other areas? Alarm times, shopping carts, the number of apps on your home screen? Drop it in the comments. And if you want more videos like this, where we dig into the psychology behind the small things you do without thinking, hit subscribe. We're building something here at Pattern Logic, and I'd love to have you along for it. Until next time, this is Pattern Logic, signing out.